Hello, everyone, and welcome to this extremely interesting webinar on capability management. We've got a great panel, and I think we're trying out a few new things today, which I'll talk to you very shortly. But before I continue with my blabbering, I just want to check whether you can hear my sound okay. And if you can, if you just want to um, raise your hands in the panel. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Navya. Fantastic. Thanks, Tony. All good. Alrighty. So, look, hopefully you had a chance to have a look at the slide that's there on the screen, and taken some action. But I think this is going to be one of those topics where we are going to have a lot of content to cover. We've got some experienced panelists online today who will be sharing their views and who are immersed in the depth of capability management in their organizations. What we're trying out today is give you a bit of a chance to participate in the conversation. I know it can be difficult during the webinar. You have the option, as you can see from the screen, of participating in the webinar QA box. So if you do send us the questions, we will, and the panelists and myself will attempt to answer those questions. But we have a parallel discussion going on in a capability professionals management group that we have formed on LinkedIn, and you can see the address there on the screen, which is http bit.ly LICMPN. So if you just go to that particular link and request to join, there is somebody online at the moment who will immediately approve your request, and we've got a whole lot of content that's already there. So I'm just going to switch my screen. That's the screen share of the Capability Management Professionals Network forum on LinkedIn. And as you can see that we've got the stats and we've got the questions in there. So if you want to go in there, have a look at just not the graphs, but also start contributing your own views, which can be difficult in the webinar itself. That'll be fantastic. The other thing is obviously the Twitter. So if you can use the hashtag capability, that will appear on our companion page. This is the companion page which you can access from the learningcafe.com.au website, which has the link obviously to the LinkedIn resource. The tweets will come through, but we also have the graphs there for you to have a look at. So trying out a few new things, and hopefully it's going to work. We're also for the first time using Google Slides instead of the PowerPoint presentation. So that should be all very interesting. Okay, so the topic today is managing capability, new avatar of L&D, and are we doing it right? And the reason why we've been wanting to run this webinar for a long time is that there is a lot of discussion and a lot of visibility for capability in different shapes and forms, but really doesn't seem to be a consistent science or even a consistent understanding of what capability management is. And what we're going to focus on today is the 3 problem statements that you see on your screen right now at the bottom. So problem statement 1 is essentially, capability management, according to the research that we've done and what we've come across, means a lot of different things to a lot of different functions. So IT have a slightly different view of what capability means. Business have a different view of what capability means, and L&D and HR have a slightly different view, which is more skewed towards what we do. And it's quite interesting to compare what the differences are. So we're going to discuss that there's different definitions and different understanding of capability. Is that a problem, and does it pose issues in order to generate a common understanding or even a common science for the profession? The problem statement 2, and we are kind of all aware of this because we've kind of worked in building competency frameworks, and we know that a lot of the time those competency frameworks end up in shelves as nice folders, and which need to be, which are updated frequently or infrequently or completely ignored. But really, it's been quite difficult to translate those competency frameworks into real action and linking them to the work that people do in organizations. The issue is going to probably the same with capability. Capability is a little bit more widespread in what it covers, and I've got some slides on what different organizations have defined as their capability. But we also have our panelist, Darren, who's going to be talking quite a bit in depth about how capability is being practiced in Optus. And we also have We also have Tony Dunford, who will be talking about what he thinks about capability. But we also have you, so please do go and contribute either on tweet or on the LinkedIn group your thoughts. The third problem statement really is that if L&D, the question that we ask almost in every webinar is that if capability management is a broad science, does L&D and HR have the skills to practice this profession? So this session is being recorded and will be available for people who have missed attending online. So to introduce the panel, Tony Dunford. For those who have attended the conference, Tony took a very interesting session there. And Tony is the head of learning, design, and delivery group capability in Westpac. So Tony, welcome to the panel. And we also have Darren, who is the organization capability manager at Optus and has been working, really thinking about this space for a long time. And Darren usually is a regular feature in our webinars in terms of taking, I guess, getting a practical point of view and contrarian point of view to some of the hype that's around. But today, he is going to talk about how capability management is being practiced at Optus and his own views. As you can see that we've got more than 150 registrations, but interestingly, we've actually got the most number of organizations who have registered for the webinar. So you can see a partial list there. So hopefully you can see your company name there. So it's of interest, widespread interest, possibly also because it spills across to HR. Just a quick note about Learning Cafe. As you know, Learning Cafe is a community for learning capability and anybody who's interested in making the organization more effective through learning, knowledge management, performance. It really is a forum. You're aware that we are try to deliver and try to reach our audiences through different means, webinar being one of them, but we also have the unconference, Twitter, coffee catch-ups in different cities. The one that's the latest one is Brisbane. That's really grown really, really well and are having some really interesting discussions. And of course, our blog magazine that is there, which is the Learning Cafe. So just to take you to the website, that's the learningcafe.com.au website. And there's a lot of interesting content, including all the recordings for our previous webinars are there. I would request you to please subscribe to the newsletter there so that you can know when the webinars are coming through. The companion page link is there, but we've got information about different things that we're working on here. So quite rich in terms of content. So just a quick one about the next event, which is the performance management discussion. So employee performance management broken, but can we fix it? And this one, as you're aware, that generated a lot of discussion in management circles in companies and also in newspapers about how companies are abandoning the current performance management systems and processes because they've proven to be ineffective and disliked. And certainly, I've participated in a lot of performance management reviews over the years. And what I want to do is, if you dislike the performance management process as it currently stands, if you can raise your hands, that'll be fantastic. Just want to get a quick, view on how many people really don't like the performance review processes. So if you can just raise your hand in the panel, that'll be fantastic. So quite a few hands coming through. We also have the Melbourne Unconference coming up August 18th, but also workshops and further events, which you will find information in the website. The Melbourne Unconference is we're about 70 days away from the Unconference. It's quite different kind of an event, and it fills up. So we've got limited spaces, about 100 to 120. We've got some of the best talent who practice their craft and who will be talking about things that they're attempting and some of the innovations that they're doing, but also essentially look at how we can build a knowledge base that can be applied to organizations. So really interesting, lots of speakers, and both Tony and Darren spoke at the Sydney Unconference. We've got an equally talented cast at Melbourne. So please do, book. The link is there on the page. and also on the LearningCafe website. Ideasatwork.com.au is the space where we experiment about different things. We're going to start an Ideas at Work project for capability management. So if you want to join the working group, please let us know through email, and it should be an interesting exercise. Okay, so just a quick stat on the number of participants that we have, which is close to 150. About 40% or 41% actually have capability within their title and role, and 60% don't. So it's quite an interesting and a nice mix, and it'll be interesting to see people who have capability within their role, to get your views about really what's happening there. So let's have a quick look at the problem statement 1, which is different definitions of understanding of capability management in different functions. And the question is, do we have to live with this variety? So just some information for you. So here's one from the internet about the enterprise capability management, where they're talking about the people, organization, enterprise, operational capability, system capability. So you can see individual competence. So it is at 3 levels: people, team, organizations, and then there is also operational capability, system capability. So there's quite a few capabilities involved in this diagram, and a lot of different aspects that are there. Then you've got another one. So the question that we asked was, what do you think when you registered for the webinar is, what do you think makes up capability? And 82% gave the answer that it comprises of skills plus knowledge plus process plus systems plus culture, which is probably closer to this graph, and also the learning organization, which concept, which I shall cover a little bit later. 7.2% said it is skills plus knowledge plus process plus systems, and 10.8% said it skills plus knowledge. So the 10.8%, which is skills and knowledge, is probably closer to what we've been traditionally doing in L&D, and to jump to the all-encompassing definition, which is skills, knowledge, process, systems, and culture. It's a big piece of work, and it overlaps with organizational development. It overlaps with strategy, etc. So I guess the question really is that, are we better off, a fundamental question for me, are we kind of better off focusing on the narrow definition where we've got our skills at the moment, or do we focus on the bigger definition of capability, where we probably need different kind of skills to what we have, or even a multidisciplinary skills team. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get the panel in now, and if you can also go to the LinkedIn group and also respond to that question that's there, that'll be fantastic. But let's bring in Darren. So Darren, I'm just going to unmute you. Darren, so your just views on the definition of capability and the various definitions that you've come across.
So in terms of how we define capability at Optus, we definitely would be in that blue part of the pie chart. So when we look at capability, we look at it from a sort of a holistic, systemic point of view in terms of how do you have to lift any particular skill. And so we do look at, okay, what are the processes, systems, maybe not so much culture, but definitely the processes, systems, behaviors, what are the knowledge systems necessary to lift any one particular skill. And we don't do it for everything. So I mean, if Excel all of a sudden becomes an important skill, well, we don't have to be that holistic. But more and more, we're finding that we have to bring all of these sort of various channels at a system perspective to make sure that a skill lift will actually occur.
Thanks, Darren. And Tony, over to you.
I think it's an interesting. When I saw this graph, I was a bit surprised, I have to tell you. Perhaps maybe my question is that what happens in people's organisations, or is that what academically people are more inclined to agree? So for us at Westpac, I think we'd be kidding ourselves, and those that know me know I'm prone to being blunt. I think we'd be kidding ourselves to say that it's anything more than skills and knowledge with a little bit of a view towards culture, more of an agreement that that's important perhaps rather than intentionality. But I'm interested actually in what people are considering process and systems that make up capability, because perhaps my definition of capability is slightly different.
Thanks, Tony. And look, we've, just going through the research that we've done, we found very different definitions of capability. So this is an interesting point to ponder upon, is that while all those people involved in capability or aspiring to be into capability management, there actually isn't any agreement on what capability management is. But there are certain, if you just look at the job ads that are coming through, they give some interesting pointers, which I'll share with you a little bit later. So we also talked about the where does capability management sit? So obviously it's a biased audience, so we've got about 65% of people who said should sit within HR and L&D, and that's not surprising given that the audience is HR and L&D. But a significant percentage, which is around 40%, said that it should sit under strategy or business or operations. So strategy and business operations, so that's about 40%. So I'm just probably interested in hearing from you, and if you go to the LinkedIn page and start responding there, that'll be fantastic. But again, to Tony, what are your views on this graph?
I think traditionally it's easy to say capability sits in L&D, or learning as I like to call it, which makes sense from a functional point of view. Should it sit in strategy, or should building capability be a strategic imperative for a business? It absolutely should, and you'd be avoided at your own peril if your organisation doesn't have building people's capability as a key part of their strategy. So therefore I do agree with that. Again, probably my slightly skewed point of view would be that I would like to hope that capability management sits with the leaders of the people in their business, and the enabling of that sits in a learning type function.
Thanks, Tony. Darren, over to you.
Hi. So I guess my view would be it depends, right? So there's no such thing as the best structure. It's sort of what's the least worst structure for the needs of the business at a particular point in time. So sometimes capability should be owned end to end within the business, depending on the nature of that business, or maybe it should be centralized. I think Tony's right that really ultimately the ownership of capability to making sure that the identification of the capabilities and what are the capabilities necessary to drive that business forward, making sure it works, should be owned by the business. The L&D is an enabler of that. However, more and more I'm thinking that, and this might come across in my presentation, that L&D and HR have a much more greater role to proactively play in that space, to think strategically and say, I see what's happening in the environment, I see what's happening in 3 to 5 years down the road, and I think, Mr. or Mrs. Executive, these are the capabilities that you need to start looking at.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, look, this is quite an interesting question. I was actually quite surprised by 40% saying that it should sit outside of HR and L&D. And I guess the question about capability really is that the organization should be capable or delivering, or should be ready to deliver the results and the future that it's envisioning, which is why probably people have pointed to strategy and business. And I guess what Darren, just to what you're saying is that I guess it really doesn't matter where it sits as long as it's delivering the most value, and I guess where whichever function takes the leadership on that. But it's a question that we'll continue to look at. We've just got a quick question on the screen, so if you just want to answer that question on the screen, I'll close the poll in a couple of minutes. So if you just want to quickly answer that question, that'll be fantastic. All right, just waiting. 39% have voted. All right, so okay, so I'm gonna I think we've got a trend now, so I shall close and share the results. But essentially, what we've seen here is that 61% of the audience think that because there's no common language or definition, the uptake might be slow, and 24% think that we'll just have to live with the different views and muddle along. There are a few optimists who think that HR and L&D view of capability will dominate, but we'll have to watch that space. Okay, so problem statement 2 is organizations build capability frameworks but struggle to link it with real business results and skills. And obviously Darren's going to talk about Optus, and we've also got Tony, who might talk about Westpac. So it might be different there, but from experience and also a lot of anecdotal evidence, what we find is that just take the case of competency frameworks. Really haven't come across so many organizations. Well, let me take that back. I've come across lots of organizations who define their capability or the competence frameworks very, very well. So there's really structured information, but struggle to use them on an everyday basis. So let me show you a couple of slides. This one is from the public service. I've taken from the website, and this is their definition or their view of what managing capability is, and their view is very much aligned with L&D. So you can see, and you can go to this this particular page, which is also there on the Flipboard page that we've got going. So if you join the Flipboard page, you will see links to, this is curated content, and links to everything that we're talking about and more. And if you've got some articles on capability, just flip it in there, right? So this one, they've got some detail about the principal elements, and it aligns very closely to L&D. The more interesting one is the New South Wales Public Services, and they've again got they've actually capability framework is quite extensive, and it's public knowledge, and that's where I've taken it from. And you can see that their framework essentially comprises of I guess 5 areas plus the occupation specific capabilities. So it's the 6 which build up a capability for any profession. And you can see that the next slide really talks about the different components of those capability blocks, personal attribute, relationship, results. Some of them are, I guess, soft skills, and some of them are, work collaboratively, kind of a little bit not very easy to define or build interventions around. So but it's really well defined in this document. I would recommend anybody to go and have a look at the document. And further on, they also have the occupation specific. This is where it starts to get into details. And the one that I've taken an example is the information technology, so ICT. And what they've done for ICT is essentially made a reference to the SIFA framework, right, which has about 97 skills across 6 categories, right? Which includes, I think it also overlaps with some of the, the higher capabilities that's outlined, because this is, I think, an independent capability which they've made a reference to. But 97 skills across 6 categories, that's pretty complex. So you can see that, and I guess nobody's denying that a large organization like the public service is a very complex organization. But in my own mind, I was kind of thinking, how do you really start planning, implement, all this? So, would be quite interested in, hearing from you about what, what's happening in your organization. So probably, hand it over to Tony for your views on, I guess, capability framework, but also more specifically competency frameworks, which I guess we are more used to.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from my experience in many organisations, including my own at Westpac, where we've built many capability frameworks / competency frameworks, all depending on the wording, I don't believe they're effective or successful. I believe they're a obvious and tangible outcome that a lot of business leaders like, but as someone who's built many and observed what happens at best 6 months later they're nearly almost all redundant. There's probably a few zealots who are still looking at them, but they go by the wayside, and then you're in a sort of a 3 or 4 year cycle where people suddenly decide, wouldn't it be good if we had another one? So I really think, personally, there's not a lot of value in building them, certainly not the value of the time and energy it takes. I would much rather either see us moving to a more human way of describing them, a la a success profile or something similar to that, or perhaps even more radically suggest that won't similar people in the jobs that you need to understand the capability of, won't they tell each other anyway, and wouldn't it be better to provide a collaboration platform that allows them to share their genuine expertise rather than have a function like ours try and codify that into words and sentences that aren't real to anybody anyway.
Thanks, Tony. And before I go to Darren, there is a poll on your screen. So if you're not looking at your screen, please do get back to your screen and just respond to that question, because I think we'd love to get your views on what you think, about capability and competence framework. So 49% have voted. If the rest could vote, that'll be fantastic. Darren, over to you, just in terms of your experience with capability/competency frameworks.
Completely agree with every syllable that Tony said, actually. So in my experience, they're not worth the effort. If I had to, which is what we did in some cases, I'll just go out and buy them. There are libraries that you can buy, and they do all the work, and they're researching those capabilities, and they will evolve them. You get access to those updated competencies, but we don't do that very often either. They're just they become obsolete as soon as you post them on your intranet site.
Thanks, Darren, and the audience agrees. Building frameworks is the easy part, and 19%, about 20% even said that it's futile to actually build them. And that's my other question is, look, the nature of work and the work that we do is becoming more complex and more transient, living in a knowledge economy and the smart nation, etc. So I guess it is going to become more difficult to define precisely what capabilities are required, because business is moving at the speed of light now, and disruption and just all those terms that we hear. So is there any point in, how do we deal with this increasing fast moving capabilities that are required? So Darren, over to you for that.
Yeah, well, I think Tony really explained it quite well. I mean, I can't remember his exact words, but I think it's more around. You're right. Everything is changing so fast. So how do you build sort of the interconnected systems and networks for people to actually share what's working well? What are they doing that's leading to success, and that people can sort of learn from each other? But also just to get external access and information. So this ICT stuff that you're sharing. Why couldn't people take a look at that, and say what rings true for them and for their role, and use that as data to help them figure out how they need to develop.
Thanks, and I think just thanks, Darren. And we've got a few. I know you'll cover stuff in your presentation, which I want to get to very quickly. Problem number statement 3 is the question that we ask for just about everything at LearningCafe, is that if capability management is such a broad science and is a little bit more sophisticated, do L&D and HR have the skills? So the responses that we've got, is what kind of skills are required, and about 50% say knowing how the business operates is critical. Then we've got the next biggest chunk is learning, design, and development. We've also got change management at 11%, none of the above, 11.3%, and business analysis 10.4%. Personally, my view is that business analysis probably needs to be a bigger chunk, but I'm not surprised with the L&D. The purple area being a little bit larger, because given the audience bias. But I think it's this is what we've been hearing and what we were discussing at LearningCafe. The knowing how the business operates seems to be a key requirement from L&D people now. So really kind of knowing how your bank works or how your telecom company works, and what are the how is it becoming more profitability, etc. It becomes a key to managing capability. And unfortunately, of all the surveys that we've researched and our own experience has indicated that business acumen is actually the biggest gap amongst L&D and HR professionals. Maybe we are too busy delivering the things that we do that we actually don't look at the big picture of how the business is doing, and hence don't react to that. So again, I think this is something that we've discussed before, but it does point that if HR and L&D want to move to capability, and I know that Darren covers this in his presentation, but before we go to Darren, Tony, your views on the slide?
Yeah, I think knowing how your business operates is a come to work requirement, to be absolutely honest. I don't feel that any function that's supporting the business is of any use if they don't understand how their business operates and how money is made and how shareholder value, if that's what you're doing, is generated. So I would absolutely agree with that. The only lens I would probably put on it, agreeing with your comments, Stephen, is that I think curiosity and the desire to understand is probably the most important component, because that's the only way you'll ever do a good job of that. So thinking that you know from your delightful spot in the office, away perhaps from the core part of your business, is the greatest recipe for disaster. So, yes to all of those things, but be curious, and if you're not talking to real people, you'll clearly never develop what the business needs.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Tony. Over to you, Darren. And the question I want to ask you, but I want to preface that question with this comment, is that this business acumen, need for business acumen, we've known for a long, long time within HR and L&D. It's actually probably a couple of decades old, this gap, but we never seem to get closer to bridging it. Any ideas as to why that state of affairs?
Yeah, so I guess firstly,
clarify why
we're not, it's been such a requirement that's been there for a long time, but we never seem to, L&D never, or HR never seem to become better at business acumen. It's an old requirement. Darren,
sorry. Do you want to jump in first, or Darren?
Yeah, Darren, go for it.
Right. I think the reason, and so business acumen is a huge thing at Optus at the moment, but I don't think it's necessarily limited to just HR L&D as being a need.
True.
We're finding it's across the business. I think the reason why sort of maybe L&D people get away with it is because quite often if L&D is forced to or content being a tick box order taker in terms of delivering training that the business says this is what we need, well, you potentially get by without being having a lot of business acumen. If, however, that you're trying to lift real change within the business, and therefore you have to know how things get done, how business operates, where the business is heading, and its challenges, you're looking at lifting overall capability, then you cannot do that without having some level of business acumen, commercial acumen behind you.
Thanks, Darren. Look, just another slide on a concept which I personally subscribe to a lot, which is the learning organization by Peter Senge. And this slide kind of describes the four, I guess, the 5 components of a learning organization, which is an organization which is constantly learning and reacting to what is required to be delivered. I think it's a great concept, and it's something that's becoming more and more relevant. Now, each one of those boxes that's there has actually got a lot of depth behind it, but it's certainly a concept that you should try and get to know. So it's it's got some of the principles which might address what we require at capability management. But over to Darren to talk about what's happening in Optus. Darren, over to you.
Okay. How much time do I have, Stephen?
About 20 minutes. 25 minutes.
20 minutes. Oh, okay.
25 minutes, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so firstly, just before I get into capability management, so just probably explain a little bit about Optus so you understand the scope. So Optus is the second largest telco in Australia, and we're part of the 130-year-old Singtel group. But Singtel's EBITDA last year was $5 billion. But Singtel was growing in a good year. Its customer base, the population of Australia. So it's growing its customer base in Africa, Asia, India, around the world by 20 million a year. $5 billion in EBITDA, yet Optus still contributes half of that. So last year we contributed $2.5 billion in EBITDA. We have over 8,000 staff, and about 2/3 of those are in sort of frontline roles such as retail, customer service, or supporting our network. We also have a wholesale division, two business-to-business functions, a small medium business. We're also the only telecom in Australia that has the capability to build satellites and put them up in the sky. So the vast majority of Australian satellites we built or put them up there. That's just a little bit about Optus. So in terms of is capability management the evolution of HR and L&D? Yes, I think it is. But I think the reason is the why is it evolving is that, well, everyone else is evolving, so why shouldn't we have to as well? So actually, if you just want to click through all of that, sorry, I didn't realize I had animations on there. So one of the reasons why I think that it is evolving is that compared to traditional L&D, I don't think traditional L&D can cope with the speed of what's happening anymore. Like Stephen said, things are moving at light speed. And so our ability to actually then develop the capabilities and skills necessary for new roles and new skills, by the time we actually develop quite often some training, sometimes it's redundant. So I've used this slide before at Learning Cafe, so you may have seen it before as an example, just in terms of how the nature of jobs are changing. Jobs that 10 years ago didn't actually exist, and then 10 years from now they're talking about all sorts of new training. It's actually an old slide. This is like from 5 years ago. So some of these jobs are actually occurring. So the ones with the red stars, I did this presentation last year. I could not find a job description for any of them. This year, when I presented again, all of a sudden I could find job descriptions. There's job ads for some of these jobs that are now appearing, and having the capability to and find that capability, build it, sustain it, and whatnot. All right. The other thing that's I think is changing very fast is that we've talked about this before is that people can get their training anywhere, anytime, on any device. So it's sort of missing on this. I'm not sure if the whole slide is being seen, but there's some examples there in terms of people delivering training. Thank you. So John Lee's doing that. Calls himself a teacher. Go on YouTube, look him up. He's more of a how to start up a small business. That $232,000. That's not his annual income. That is his monthly income he makes by being an online teacher. Becky Mansfield, $28,000 a month just by blogging. She doesn't do any video, but teaches people how to do it yourself in the home. And an extreme example is it's not really teaching, but PewDiePie, with the one that's 18 minutes and 30 seconds. He has the same subscription base as Netflix in the United States. 41 million followers on YouTube. He made $10 million last year. So people are going out there and getting training that sits outside their LMS. This screen needs to reduce in size. Well, people are getting, this is a slide that was sent to me by, I didn't build this one, it's from Ann Bartlett-Bragg from Ripple Group, but she got it from Microsoft. So this research that Microsoft has done in terms of they're getting their training outside your LMS, they're getting it out of your head, they're not getting it from your headquarters, they're getting it elsewhere, and they're doing it on the commute, they're doing it at home, maybe they're doing it at their lunch break, but it's not on your learning management, it's not in your training courses that we're designing. So the role of capability, the role of L&D is fundamentally changing. We're not simply the deliverers of training. We're the ones who have to sort of build the network and build the systems to actually allow people to find the stuff that they need and help them make sure that they're actually learning from it. So on to the next slide. Also, just in terms, another example in terms of how fast things are changing and how hard it is now is to actually train some of these new skills. So the World Economic Forum produces predictions about the future of work, the future of employment. One of the things they do is what are the most commonly high demand skills from a soft skills perspective, and then they predict out in 5 years what will be the new ones. And so here you can see that traditional things that we may have trained our people in, such as negotiation, quality control, service orientation, they're slipping down the list. And now we can see that critical thinking and creativity by 2020 are going to be some of the most important skills. So, like, if you were to ask me to, build or get a program to develop negotiation skills, easy. You can do that. You can go out anywhere and get a negotiation skills course and then get a program to embed it. How do you teach creative thinking? How do you develop creativity? It's not solely done through a training course. So our role in terms of how we build capability within organizations is getting more and more complex. And the technology that people are using it for learning is like I said, the LMS. And we're a good example at Office. We've bought a new LMS, and by the time we get it up and running, we see other technology that, oh God, that looks even better. But even though a lot of our workforces are becoming more decentralized, it's becoming more of a continued workforce, they're mobile, more and more people are working outside of the headquarters. There's even this greater sort of ecosystem of people that we're tapping into to get things done, right? So with contractors, consultants, and whatnot, or offshoring and outsourcing. It's our sort of ecosystem that we deal with is fundamentally changing. How do we do that from a training perspective?
Darren, can I just
that last one?
Can I just interrupt to ask a quick question, because there's one point that's I think is quite relevant, which is technology is changing fast. Your LMS is obsolete by the time you sign the procurement details. This whole learning technology, which is kind of based around the LMS world, and I'll ask Tony also to give his views. But essentially, what's available to us now in terms of learning technologies, my own experience and my own field research that I've done seems to indicate that the current learning technologies is not, especially in large organizations, is not flexible, is not cost effective enough for us to manage capability in a more effective way. So I'll probably get Tony. And Tony, what are your views on, I guess, the agility of the learning technology that's available in the market, and especially given that they cost a little bit to buy and implement. So therefore, I guess it's one of the barriers that I think in terms of implementing capability management. Tony, any idea?
Yeah. Certainly, as some of you may know, Jeevan, you'll definitely know, at Westpac we are boldly charging down this path. And we're about a year into an implementation of an alternative to traditional LMS while maintaining a traditional LMS as we need to, where we have a platform now that we're slowly rolling out throughout the organisation, which is much more nimble and reflective of how people learn, how modern learning happens. That's, will provide a consistent experience for people who want to add their own learning, share that with other people, act as experts, curate learning that then forms part someone's, mandatory pathways in time, and it's available on any device anywhere outside the firewall. So much of that we've done, much of that we've still got to do. So we're down this path because I absolutely agree that LMS is dead in terms of its functionality and does it effectively support the way people learn. And if we want to be serious in our profession, we need to harness the learning that people have already. As Darren has said many times, they're finding ways. There's lots of people in the learning business. Why should we try and create our own if people can grab that, aggregate it at least, and curate it, I hope.
Thanks, Tony. Darren, your views on learning technologies not being agile enough And I'm not talking about any specific organization, but on an average across industries.
Yeah. So Tony's right. The LMS is just the traditional LMS is or even any sort of in-house system that solely looks at it as being like a library of internal developed or internally purchased learning interventions is just not obsolete. It's not an accurate reflection of what people experience outside work, and more people want their experience to be at work similar to what they can get at home. So at Optus, the functionality that Tony referred to, we don't have yet. We've recently purchased, a SAP-based SuccessFactors people-wide system across the group, which we're implementing. And the type of functionality that Tony talked about, where individuals can curate, create their own sort of page, share information, that's finally coming to us in June. So at that point, we'll be able to start learning and figuring out how can we actually leverage that technology further.
Thanks, Darren. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. So next slide is just for, I think this next slide before I actually get stuck into what we're doing at Optus. And so I'm just going to, I think I've spent enough time. I think I've done enough time creating the need. I think this slide's just more about complexity, where the VUCA is, VUCA is not a crisis anymore. It's just a situation normal. And standard sort of traditional learning approaches do not do well in a complex environment. So but probably my favorite quote is at the bottom right hand here, in terms of less emphasis on training of competencies and more training on learning how to learn through social networking, whatnot. This has become very important to me, and I sort of shared this at a function yesterday, is that as an example, in one part of the business, I spent a solid year doing nothing but working with the leaders and the high potentials on teaching them how to learn more effectively as adults. And we found that has been very successful. So I think more and more I'm realizing that we need to help people learn how to learn and how they can use technologies and social networking. But even when they step out of a course, what can they do themselves to make sure that they're actually going to be able to embed that learning? So moving on to what Optus is doing. So this next slide. There's a brief history in terms of, I've been here for almost 5 years now, and it's substantially changed from a learning perspective. So in 2011, every single business unit had its own OD manager, its own L&D manager, and its own organizational effectiveness team manager. And also their own HR director, HR manager, HR consultants, and an HR support team. It was a massive HR function. And then there's also the corporate Optus-wide function as well. So over time, more and more has been centralized. So what it looks like now is that there's two business units have been merged. HR directors are looking after a couple of HR directors looking after more than one business unit. And the HR business partners are the only ones who are still embedded in the actual business. The rest of us are now sitting in a shared function. So there's 4 capability managers as opposed to 8, and we share those business units, and we are responsible for the end-to-end OD and L&D or capability strategy for those business units. And but within it, we have a traditional sort of L&D team that actually helps us deliver. But we also have an HR consulting function, an HR support function that's now centralized. Right? So it's a highly centralized shared service model. Okay, next slide. So the capability manager job description is all. So I've just pulled out the words, some words out of the job description, and then there's a lot there, right? But I think what's important to note is what is not there. What's not there is training. What is not there is learning and development, for instance. So there's an organizational capability team that I sit in, and that organizational capability team is end-to-end, but the capability manager, the one who's responsible for lifting capability, training and L&D is not a significant factor. What is more important is strategy, holistic systemic approach, stakeholder management, stuff about being brave. You know, I could give you all sorts of examples where I've had to front up and say, no, we can't do that type of training. Training would be wrong, or and in a boardroom or whatnot, and try and convince leaders that training is not the answer. Next slide.
So Darren, before we go to the next slide, just on that, you know, what you've listed on the slide, you don't need an L&D background to, you know, have those. So are you saying that, you know, the capability managers who are part of the team could be from, I guess, any part of the business or any function as long as they've got this, or do you require an understanding of, you know, learning and development concepts and practices?
Yeah. So whilst it's not listed in the job description, I think it'd be hard pressed to not have some level of L&D sort of traditional training background, so that you can so that you know from an adult education perspective, you still have to have that. But it's not considered some of the more critical capabilities, they're must-haves. But everybody on the team, I've got you know, 3 peers. We all come from a L&D or OD background.
Thanks, Ed.
What does the organization capability team do? So we, in some cases, it's we do Singtel-wide work. Sometimes it's Optus-wide. You know, right down to team interventions. We really get involved in any sort of individuals, but it's primarily around business unit specific. We get when there's new products, new services, we get pulled in to develop the training necessary for that, or if there's new technologies, either we develop it or we go out and find a provider. So it's sort of an end-to-end sort of approach to capability, where from strategy to planning to strategic workforce planning. We also have someone who's looking at the future of learning, you know, 3 to 5 years down from a technology perspective. We handle global mobility in my team across the Singtel group. We have a growing graduate program. The high potential, sort of the only one that's driven from a Singtel perspective is the high potential and succession management. That's driven by Singtel, but we have an Optus person who manages it from an Optus-wide perspective. So that's the team. Just go to the next slide.
Darren, while I'm going to the next slide, could you tell me what's the link with strategic workforce planning? So how do you link with that?
Yeah. So strategic workforce planning is a new piece for us. I think it's been in Westpac for at least a couple of years now. We're just starting, and so what strategic workforce planning is very proactively going out there and what's happening within 3 to 5 years. What are the latest technologies? We work with the strategy team and others as well, but also external people, and say, okay, well, what could the world look like 3 to 5 years? What are the changing capabilities and needs, and how could that potentially impact Optus from a people or a capability perspective? So it's a very data-driven. There's a lot of research in saying, okay, that looks at, you know, trying to think of an example. I did a workforce segment profile on cybersecurity, you know, now and down to 5 years, and what is the data saying? How hard it's going to get or be to get that cybersecurity capabilities to the point where Singtel needs that capability. And it's going to be really hard. So it's a very scientific evidence approach to sort of doing some crystal ball exercises. So the capability manager, what we meant to do, so that we're in theory, and so Tony made a good point, and it's just like he was saying, he's sort of not so sure about, you know, all this other stuff, processes and systems. So I'd love to say that we work in this space all the time, but we don't. The theory of the role is that we bring all these things the capability team does together into a holistic, systemic approach to delivering on the capability needs, the skill lifts of each of the business units, and then Optus-wide. Sometimes we get that, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes, admittedly, the leaders, we don't win the debate, and leaders just say, that sounds nice, but I just need the training. And sometimes that's driven by an immediate need. Sometimes it's driven because the leader has got a low L&D score in the engagement survey and thinks that if I just can get people into a classroom, that'll lift the L&D score. So there's all sorts of reasons. But I'm finding the strategic discussion is happening more and more. So this is we don't. This isn't an interview guide. It's sort of like a thinking guide that we use to help have those strategic conversations with executives. And so one thing you'll see that's, again, not here. There's no question here around what skills do you think are missing? What are your capabilities missing? We seek first to understand what are the commercial drivers, the imperatives, where's the company, where's their part of the business going next year, within the next 3 years. And then later on becomes a conversation, okay, what are the capabilities or skills and knowledge necessary for them to be successful and achieve their strategic targets and objectives.
Darren, can I just interrupt? Also, get in Tony here. So, these are kind of quite strategic questions, and it really, I guess, like you said, it doesn't have anything specific to L&D. And the question I probably want to get in Tony in this, Tony, just in terms of having this strategic discussions with business, how well do you really kind of need to know the business and how it's doing to get value, or can you just ask the questions and just note the answers and go back and get somebody else to give you an interpretation? So how well at Westpac or with yourself, are you well versed with what the business is doing?
I think we're in various degrees of, being well versed or in depth. However, certainly the more competent in the team are really close, and I fundamentally believe you've got to be close. I think you have to talk language like a business person to add genuine value. If you want a seat at the table or you want to be valued, you've got to talk about what keeps them awake at night, and therefore translate that into how we can support them through capability, not the other way around.
Thanks, Tony. Darren, over to you for that question.
Yeah, agree. So you've got to be able to, business leaders will often, their eyes will glaze over if you start from a capability perspective. You've got to talk the language of the business. You've got to have business acumen. You've got to know what the commercial results are last year and how they're tracking against next year. So that rather than just, like I said, there's a bunch of questions there, but we also come to the table more and more in terms of trying to proactively see, I understand your business. I don't necessarily want to ask you these questions so I may understand it better, but I think I understand it, and start proactively already coming up with what we think their issues are, and sort of test that out with them, as well as just simply asking them. Yeah, I think that gives you more sort of credit or credibility. You're coming to the table with a view about commercial issues than just simply asking them.
Thanks, Ed.
So again, this is just a thinking tool that we use. It's not we don't present this stuff, but it just helps guides our thinking as we start developing a solution. So being very clear in terms of what is the problem or the opportunity for the business, and also being, as much as we can, what is the evidence that this is a problem. So an example is, recently I've been asked this by a senior team, we need to focus on the leadership of people leadership in this part of the business. And I go, well, why? I'm not seeing any evidence of that. What's the actual evidence of saying that you need to focus on your people leaders? So getting to some facts, but also then looking, okay, well, what are supporting competencies and skills necessary to lift that? If you look at the bottom there, we also look at systems and processes, and what needs to change, or what sometimes we call sort of other organizational levers that are necessary to build that, in order to build a skill or to have that problem or opportunity addressed. So again, skill or competencies is just one part of the equation that we bring to the table. It's a very holistic approach to lifting the capability of an organization or a part of the business. Moving on. Sorry, I'm going very quick here and realizing that we're running out of time. Okay, so I had to blur this because this is confidential stuff that I put on there, and you won't be able to unblur it because instead of those pictures. But so that we take that strategy and just it becomes quite sort of detailed plans and deliveries. So we track the budgets, we track return on investments, we track all sorts of metrics on an ongoing basis. So it isn't just sort of strategy or something might think is airy-fairy. We get right down to a fine level of detail. We're also relying more and more on L&D external vendors to do a lot of our design and delivery. that function is becoming much bigger. If you were to visit my team, it's a bit of an empty floor at the moment because more and more of we're not replacing resources as they leave, and we're becoming much more of a reliant on an outsourced model. Okay, next slide. And this is just the last one. So just in terms of then empowering people to manage their own development. So yes, we have these programs of work to lift capability, but we're very much about you own your career, you own your development, just like the vast majority of organizations. But what we've learned is that people don't know where to go to get that information or what to do. So we're building these sort of 70-20-10 based hints and tips in terms of, okay, well, if you want to build change, I just pulled change management out as an example. Where could you go through, get formal training, or through Glinda, or through our LMS? How could you use your relationships, and how could you use your on the job? And that's really, we're finding it's really helpful for managers and employees to then have discussions in terms of how they could lift that particular skill, so they own that the IDP, rather than waiting for these our big sort of programs of capability or training. I went through that very quick. I apologize. I went over time, but I think that's it for me.
Thanks very much, and Darren and Tony, for your participation and your views. Look, I think this is a really interesting topic, and I think we're just at the start of the journey. Learning Cafe will be focusing more on capability management, since we see this as the progression for L&D and HR, and a way to deliver more value to the business. Therefore, we're going to form a working group to explore and experiment and build collateral around capability management, and we'll probably even hold events around capability management. So please do let us know if you want to participate, and hopefully you can join the capability management professionals group in LinkedIn. So thank you, everyone. I know that we had a few questions. We did have a few audio difficulties today, so apologies for that. The session is recorded, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar and also at the conference. Thanks, everyone, and thanks to the panel